Working with investors. This is Christine Serafini with Miranda Real Estate Group. And over almost 23 years, I've been able to handle almost 170 transactions with investors, whether that's a 2-family, 3-family, 4-unit, or a multi-unit building, maybe even a restaurant or business. And when I'm working with investors, investors do have different wants and needs. And I am here today interviewing Jeff Miller.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Jeff is a longtime investor, flipper.
Yeah, kind of both. We have rentals and we flip primarily, yeah. So going on, 15, 20 years now.
Awesome. How many rentals do you have?
We have about 50 doors currently.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And how many houses do you think you flipped?
We flip about 15 per year, so it's probably somewhere around 50, 55 that we've done.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, not too bad.
Well, when I work with investors, a lot of the times, and most of the time, it's not an emotional decision, right?
It's not. Yeah, it comes down to sometimes a gut call and math, right? That's really what we end up looking at.
Mm-hmm. And as I work with these investors, there's a little bit of framework, and I'm going to refer to notes here, but they find, they analyze, they want to protect.
Yeah.
Then they want to execute, and then they want to scale. They want more,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the first thing about the find,
yeah.
Sourcing the opportunities, okay? How do you identify opportunities worth pursuing?
Yeah, great question. And it really comes down to no matter what you do for a living, whether it's me flipping houses as a real estate investor or a real estate agent, right? It's all about lead generation. That's what we're all in. So I think, how I find leads is really a network and just overall opportunity, right? So I deal with a lot of real estate agents. That's primarily where I get most of my referrals from. Agents that know that I do this for a living, and then they find properties that would be good candidates, and they refer them to me. And of course, we do advertising, Facebook, social media, Instagram, all that stuff generates leads as well. I'll go to auctions on occasion, but for me, it really comes down to a personal network that I have, and most every house I've done in the last 10 years has all been direct referrals.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. Or you're not competing either.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and that really is. You want to kind of eliminate that competition as much as possible. Granted, there are times where it goes out to multiple investors, so there's always some competition in this space. But yeah, if you can eliminate that as much as possible, it gives you a big advantage.
When looking at properties, is there one thing or maybe two things that would just disqualify something that you're not interested in? Yeah,
I think for me and a lot of investors, it comes down to how exact are we on our ARV? So what we refer to as our after repair value. So after we've rehabbed it, if we're going to keep it as a rental, we're going to refinance it typically. So we want to get it appraised, or we're going to sell it. So for me, what instantly disqualifies a property is, say if you were the agent, you refer it to me and I say, what is it going to be worth after I've done the rehab? And there's not a definitive answer. A lot of times it's a big range.
Yeah.
If the house is a rural house in the middle of nowhere, the range might be $100,000.
Sure.
To me, that's something that I'm going to probably stay away from, and a lot of investors, or if I do offer on it, it's going to be very low to protect myself. So for me, I look for clear-cut ARVs. So homes and developments primarily is what I'm looking for. Or in a populated area where there's 4 sales on the same street and they're all within a couple $1,000s of each other. Once I know what I can sell the property for, it makes my math equation very simple.
Yeah.
I've looked at thousands of homes, so I know what it's going to cost me to rehab it. I know what my holding costs are going to be. I know what my desired profit margin is, and then I know what my offer is going to be. So the more definitive that ARV, the easier my job gets.
Do you feel that inventory has changed for these types of properties over maybe the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah, without a doubt. And not only has inventory changed, there's obviously less houses on the market now, right? But I think when the inventory goes down, the homes that I'm looking at, which are primarily off-market properties or houses that are about to go on the MLS, right? We're trying to get there early. A lot of times these sellers we're dealing with now know that there's not a lot of houses on the market.
Yeah.
So they don't take the lowball offers anymore. When I started this 15, 20 years ago, you could offer a seller a pretty ridiculously low number, and a lot of times they would take it. Now that's just not the case. You have to be competitive, you have to be fair with your offers. So inventory, I don't think affects me as directly as other people, but it affects my ability to buy properties for as cheap as I used to. We're paying top dollar for a lot of the houses that we're buying.
Do you find that you're getting more off-market deals, or are you finding things through realtors through the MLS?
Yeah, for that's kind of a loaded question, because most of what I buy is technically an off-market deal, but it's from a real estate agent. So if I don't buy it, it's going on the MLS right afterwards. So it is through an agent, but a lot of times the sellers need to sell their property quick. So they want someone to take a look at it fast. So kind of both, if that makes any sense.
No, I understand. And, you know, there could be opportunities for off-market, but maybe the seller knows there's a better opportunity to put it on the market.
And certainly from, you know, I'm a big advocate of social media. We get a lot of referrals lately off social media, and that's a direct seller contacting me because they've watched, you know, a YouTube video that we've done or an Instagram post or a Facebook post saying, hey, this is what we do. And now we're starting to get some of those people. So I think some of the social media stuff shouldn't be overlooked. It's free advertising,
absolutely,
right? So,
and it's branding, and you get to talk your message.
And you can say what you want, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it just works. So now we're starting to see that a little bit. And ideally, you know, all investors are looking for off-market deals.
Sure.
You know, if a house has been on the MLS for 6 months and then someone refers it to me, or if I find it, I'll certainly look at it. But that also means every other investor has looked at it and said no. So a lot of times I walk into those properties like kind of looking for what's wrong instead of looking for what's right. And that impacts my ability to buy it a lot of times.
Yeah, a lot of times when I work with investors, I just, you know, they're like, well, why hasn't anyone else purchased this? And it's like, I try to really advise them, why don't you just put your blinders on and say, is this the right property for me? Is this going to give me what I'm looking for? Rather than saying, well, why didn't someone else take it? You know,
and that's easier said than done sometimes.
It is, right? and I understand that. Again, it's not emotional. It's transactional. It's number driven.
And this is a weird analogy sometimes, but when I'm talking about the houses that I buy, sometimes I refer to it as like dating. Right? Like sometimes you just know. I pull up to a house and I go, oh, this is great. And other times I pull up and I go, I don't know.
Not for me.
Right? And sometimes you just know. It's a gut call. Sometimes you just vibe with it or you don't. And sometimes it's as simple as that. I've walked into houses and turned to the agent and said, no, I'm not going to buy it. Let's go somewhere else. And we leave. And other times I walk in right away and I know I'm not leaving here without making an offer. So it's a gut call sometimes.
All right. We're going to talk about analyzing. I want to go to the side of more of a multi-unit, looking for doors, right? Investing in future and holding on to some whether 2-family, 4-unit, multi-unit. What is important to you from an investor standpoint that me as a realtor should have prepared for you when I'm telling you that I have a multi-unit for sale?
You know, my view, my answer might be a little different than others. I think a lot of investors, the easy answer is cash flow, right? Is the rent going to easily cover the debt on the property? And then give you a cash flow that's going to cover future expenses and make a profit. And cash flow is an important part for me. But really, for me, I still treat my multi-unit properties as flips. Meaning, can I sell it if I need to? Can I liquidate this? So again, not overpaying, and is it in an area that's going to go up in value? A lot of if you find a 5-unit or 4-unit property, sometimes you can get them for decent price if they're in rougher areas. So on paper, it might cash flow, but it's not going to appreciate as higher as some other areas. So I tend to look at it as, to me, this is all an appreciation game. If I buy a property now for $200,000, is it going to be worth $400,000 or $500,000 15, 20 years down the road? So for me, I still look at it from that standpoint. So it's a combination of cash flow and is it going to go up in value significantly over the next 10, 15 years? Because a lot of the houses that I sell now are rentals that I bought 15 years ago. You know, I buy them, renovate them, rent them, and then 10, 12 years later, the tenants move out, you go and you paint everything, and then you sell it for 2 to 3 times what you paid for it. So a lot of my flips are my old rentals.
I actually see that progression, 12 to 15 years. Things that I've sold to sellers, then they have appreciated at what they're supposed to. They've been maintained. They're rented at not top dollar market rents, but if market rents. I think that's really important. And again, the maintenance. You know, I found a lot of investors over the last 5 to 7 years that I've worked with they just thought it was just going to be easy money.
Yeah, and it's not. Now,
Yeah.
it's funny, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the hard part for me now is properties that I've owned for a long time that used to cash flow no longer do. And I think that's an important thing to talk about if we're really talking about the day, day in, day out of a real estate investor.
Certain demographic?
Well, I just think in general, some of my tenants are long-term tenants. So it's not easy to raise rents on long-term tenants. And I have people say, argue with me all the time saying, you put in the lease that it goes up every year, and we've done that. But we have some tenants that have rented from us for 10, 12 years. And we've raised a little bit, but we're below market value. If they move out, we're going to rent it for higher. But what has gone up every year? Taxes, homeowners insurance, water bills, maintenance. Perfect example is I had a building that had a hot water tank that broke. Well, hot water tank, you can go to Home Depot, buy them for $1,000. Pretty easy. We, as an investor, we've done it a million times. Now they're shorter and wider, and they no longer fit in the same space. So now you have to do demo on the space. So what was going to be a $1,000 bill turned into a $4,000 bill.
Yeah.
So little things like that add up. So properties I used to have that cash flow no longer do. So I think that's a very important part of the real estate investment. You have to make sure they cash flow more than you think you need, because your expenses are going to continue to go up. Taxes don't go down.
No.
They just don't. Some of the buildings that we've owned for 15 years, and the taxes have more than doubled. So you have to factor that in.
Do you property manage your own properties?
Okay, I was dreading this. I knew this would be a question. And my biggest advice for any real estate investor is don't manage them yourself. Separate yourself from it. Have somebody that's going to screen them properly and deal with my toilet's clogged at 2 o'clock in the morning. We do have some property managed. Some of the buildings that we have are under property management, but about 70% of the units I manage myself.
You do yourself?
Yeah, it's something I've struggled with. We've handed off. I'm a little bit of hands-on person, control freak on some things. So we have the properties that are far away. Like I live in Saratoga, and we have some properties in Averill Park. It's an hour and 20 minutes away. So we have property managers for that. Yeah, I just wouldn't be able to manage that. But in my little town of Stillwater, I manage them all myself. I'm there. People know me in the community. I've hired property managers, and then if people have a problem, they find me anyway. So I've struggled with it, but I think I've done that wrong. If there's one regret I have, or the biggest mistake I've made, is I've managed some of the properties myself.
Your own.
Yeah, I think a property manager, they deal with things faster. They don't, if someone calls me and says, hey, I'm struggling, I can't pay the rent this month, I know them. And I go, okay, get me next month. A property manager, by contract, can't do that.
Has to do that.
They have to charge late fees. They have to start the eviction process. So I've been lenient on some of those things. So don't do what I do what I say.
Yep.
And that's right, the opposite of what it should be. But I strongly recommend property management. If I could do it all over again, I would have done that from the beginning.
Yeah, I was a property manager for
I remember that.
6-7 years, and I liked it. I liked to come in contact with new tenants and new conversations. It was tough. It was tough at times. It's really important to find the right property manager.
Correct.
And know that you're going to have someone, that 24/7 service if that's needed, especially, our weather as it is right now, and safety and getting in and out of the apartments and just knowing that. So I know that's really important.
Yeah, and I think too, someone like me that has properties spread out all over the capital region, that probably means you're working with more than one property manager.
Right.
Like the guy that lives in Averill Park isn't going to manage my properties in Queensbury.
Right.
That's now an hour and a half for him. So that's kind of the downside to property management. You probably are going to need multiple property managers if you're spread out, which most of us are.
Yeah. Is there just one more question, and I know this can vary, but with property managers, is there a set fee or percentage that you should expect as an investor that you should be investing in that property management?
Yep, I think the standard is 10% of rent and 1 month's rent to rent it, right? So if you have an apartment that's $1,000 and you're my property manager, you're going to take $1,000 when you rent it. You get the first month's rent. And then you take $100 per month, you get 10%. That's kind of the starting rate.
Okay.
I think once you're established with a property manager, I've negotiated 8% instead of 10, a half a month instead of a full month. There's things you can negotiate, but 1 month's rent to rent it, and then 10% is the standard. Okay. And then one other negative thing, I don't want this to all be the negative side of this, but it's the math on it. When you hire a property manager, one of the other issues that a lot of people don't talk about is if the tenant pays the rent on the first, usually the property manager collects that and then sends you either a check or sends you the money on the 15th or 20th. Your mortgage payments are due on the 1st or the 10th. So sometimes property managers create a cash flow problem for investors. If you have 50 or 100 doors, you're not getting your money. You have $100,000 in mortgage payments due, and you don't get your rent money till the 20th. So it's something, that's one of the things that I've struggled with. If I hire a property manager, I don't get my money to the 20th. If the tenant pays me, I get it direct on the 1st or the 2nd.
Have to be some strategic negotiation.
Exactly. So it's all part of the math that you have to make sure you have some reserves, right? I have to have money in the bank at all times to cover that stuff. So that's one part that no one really talks about. It's a delay to get paid.
Going to managing risk or protecting your property. The one thing that I get a little pushback on investors is that, well, I'll deal with that municipality, I don't want to deal with this, or I have to do this over there, but I don't have to do this over here. Do you make decisions based on municipality?
I do.
You do?
I do.
And they're all different.
And I
the
know
rules and regs are all different.
It is. And I think the easy answer, there are some that are harder than others, right? And I think we know what some of the hard ones are and some of the easier ones. And I think it just really comes down to knowing that, right? So if you work in an area and do a lot, I have a friend of mine that has a lot of properties and he flips in an area that's known to be very difficult. But he's been very successful because he knows the process. So I think that's the answer to the question. You have to know the process and understand it. Smaller towns are easier. It's just a reality. So the village of something or the town of something, you can walk right in and get a permit. Other areas, it takes 3 inspections to get a permit. So yes, it is a factor. And I think for me, primarily a flipper, I have holding costs when I buy these properties. So I need to start the work right away. So if there's a month-long process to get a permit, that's going to raise my cost by $5,000 or $10,000. So it has to be factored into when in other areas I can buy it today, go to the office, get a permit, and we can start that same day. It is a factor.
And even going for the permits to do renovations, but then with multi-units, you find different municipalities, whether it's a rental certificate, whether it's an ROP, what's the expiration date? Those are
yearly inspections on those.
Tenant
others don't do it.
Yeah, there's a lot to manage there.
And I think, again, it all comes down to knowledge, right? If you're buying in those areas, talk to another investor, talk to an experienced real estate agent that knows what those rules are. Because if you do it wrong, I think that's where the real problems come in. If you start to do rehab without a permit in some of those areas, they'll shut your project down for months. And other areas, they slap your wrist and give you the permit right on the spot. So you have to be educated in that because it can really burn you. And I'm a big believer in do everything the right way. Get your permits, get your inspections done. You have to do it correctly these days.
I've had that happen to investors, and stop work orders get slammed on those windows. And, unfortunately, it costs them money. They're doing things right, but they didn't start in the beginning to do it right. And it's kind of like you're shooting yourself. Just do it right the first time, and you don't give them the, don't give them the opportunity.
And I think once you get that bad reputation, then the next time you try to apply for the permit, they recognize your name. And I've just really made it a priority to not do that. We file permits day number 1 every time. We get the inspections. When we go apply for the permits, we bring donuts and say, hey, everybody, how are you? You want those people to like you, and they want I want them to know that I'm doing things the right way. It speeds up the whole project.
It's relationship building. And I think those investors having the relationships with the municipalities, and listen, with the rental certificates, even, in a city of Schenectady where I sell, that's holding you a little bit accountable to code issues and things that you may not think about that are really important for you to have when you're holding the property, especially if you are not living in the property and you're an absentee landlord.
Without a doubt.
Give some accountability.
And I think that's an important thing too. As a new investor, a lot of what I learned was from the code guys coming in and saying, hey, look at that, look at that, look at that. And I went, oh, geez, I didn't even see that. So, I've always relied on those guys to educate me on what I need to do. They help me create my list of what we need to do for the rehab, and I'm not afraid of the inspection process if you do it the right way. Now, also on that, I've had other investors call me and say, hey, I want to sell a house. It's halfway done with rehab. You want to take a look at it? Most of the time, I know right away that there's a problem.
They got stopped.
They got stopped, and now they're trying to sell the project. And those are houses I usually stay away from.
Yep.
I'm like, no, the city already knows that you did work. All this electrical work now may have to come out. I'm out. So another reason to do it the right way. If you ever need to sell the project, you want to be able to sell it.
Yeah. The one thing I've learned from code inspectors, and it's so silly, but I always look at the hot water tanks with the downspout 6 inches from the ground. I'm like, oh, that's going to need a downspout.
And
I'm
none
like,
of them have it.
No,
they
don't.
You have to put that in.
So it's kind of, it's neat. And even inspections on properties, you hear certain things and you try to share knowledge. I'm not practicing to be an inspector or code enforcement, but it's great to share that value when you know.
Yeah, when you see the same things every time.
Yep. Let's talk about what is, let's say, a deal. What's the cleanest deal for you? The cleanest.
Now, you mean clean as in easiest?
Let's do easiest. What's easiest?
I think from a flip standpoint,
side.
you know, it's a single family home, and this is ideally what we're looking for.
Yeah, the avatar.
A single family, the perfect scenario. Single family home that structurally has been taken care of, but just is cosmetically outdated, where we're not taking down 4 walls, we're not putting in new support. We're just replacing the cabinets, replacing the bathroom, and it's all staying in the same place. As an experienced flipper, I already know the flooring we're going to use, I already know the cabinets, we can get in and measure everything, order everything, it all gets delivered, and we're in and out in 60 days. That's the perfect scenario. If we have to knock a bunch of walls down and do an addition, that's a whole different process. Now you're talking architectural permits and all this other stuff. So the cleanest deal is a single family outdated property that we're not changing the structure to the property. And whenever I see those, I get very excited.
Very excited. Yeah, those are great. And you know what? There's sellers out there with that type of property. And sometimes they feel stuck. Well, nobody wants to buy my property because it's outdated. And that's just not true. You know, there are plenty and investors or even single-family home purchasers that could do a 203K rehab. That's a different podcast. But there is opportunity there. But sellers need to understand, because you have an outdated product doesn't mean that it's not saleable.
Not at all. Not at all.
Especially for
and you know, that's a good point that I like to talk about as well. If you know, I never want to come in and lowball somebody either. I'm not in business to steal somebody's house. There's been plenty of times where I've walked into a property and it was too nice for me. And I said, you know what, I'll take it. Here's my number, but I think you can get this number if you just clean it a little bit and put it on the market. I've done that a dozen times.
And that's awesome. That's integrity right there.
Yeah, you have to. I'm not looking to steal somebody's home, because a lot of people think, oh, it's from the 70s or the 80s, and like, it still is great, you know? So we're not interested in doing that. If a house can't sell, and I always say to people, here's my card. If it doesn't sell, call me in 90 days and I'll buy it. But test the market first.
Test the market. I've been in a couple appointments that way where they said, well, someone offered me this. I said, well, you could put it on the market for $40,000 to $50,000 more.
And you know, and I like to address too, the reason house flippers primarily, or investors, you know, low offer, it's the only thing we control. So the other big advice I have for anyone listening to this that's thinking about investing, you don't really control the budget. Like I always say, if we're doing a renovation, I say, all right, we're going to do a $75,000 budget. We go over budget 90% of the time. There's problems that happen on every one, you know. We're going to replace the roof, and I know what a roof is. Then the roofers get there and realize all the wood underneath
plywood
is rotten.
Needs to be done.
Well, that's now a new cost, right? So that happens every single time. And just material costs go up on every single project. Same flooring I buy now is now $1 a square foot higher than it was a year ago. So the only thing, and we don't really control the sales price either. We think we do, you know what I mean, but we don't. So the only thing we control is that purchase price. So you really have to make sure you're getting them below market value if you're going to flip them. You said about mechanically and structurally sound and just doing cosmetics. I recently saw an investor added a second addition to a house. All right. So expanded it. And really, there's a lot of small houses right now that, oh my gosh, if they really just took a little more time. Do you have that opportunity to be able to do, like you have architect or engineers or to design something else? We've done that. We've added a bathroom to a lot of properties. A lot of properties we buy are 3-bedroom, 1 bath. And then we make them 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bath. And that extra half bath
goes a long way.
Changes the whole dynamic of the property. So that's primarily what we look for. We've added bathrooms, or bedrooms onto properties. We've enclosed porches where it's a porch, and we thought, let's turn this into a 3-season or 4-season room.
Okay.
But again, I think adding additions to a project, now you're more into the builder side than a cosmetic rehabber, which is kind of what most of us are. So I think there's almost two different strategies.
Profit margin changes too.
It changes everything, right? You know, so I think ideally kind of getting back to that cleanest deal, I would prefer properties that we can just renovate and change the cabinets and turn around and resell it. But if we have to add something, we certainly will.
Awesome. All right, let's talk scaling. So you've done this 20 years?
Approximately, yeah. We bought our first rental property probably, 19, 20 years ago.
You still own the first one?
No, we sold it.
You did?
Yep, that one we sold.
That's about right.
Yeah, you know, we kind of kept that formula. Every 10 to 12 years, we look at selling the rentals. Yeah.
I'm definitely seeing that as something that's happening 10 to 12, 13 years, and that equity is there. And again, as long as they've maintained it, have a strong rent roll, less vacancy rate, right?
Yep.
Doing that.
And taking that equity.
Do you have any units that you do short-term furnished rentals?
Yeah, we do. We have a short-term rental. It's on Airbnb and, you know, VRBO and all that stuff. Ours is in kind of a vacation area. It's in Mystic, Connecticut.
Oh, nice.
So it's, and that's, again, we're all in the same industry, right? Whether you're a single-family renter, multifamily renter, Airbnb renter, it's all under the same umbrella of real estate investing, but completely different strategies. We only have one, and I don't know if we want more than that. You're running a little hotel.
Yeah, you are.
And I knew that going in, but then when you do it, it's different. Like, you have to, you know, we've all stayed at Airbnbs before. You know, there's soap and there's coffee, and you walk in and there's snacks there
Towels
for you. Someone's got to buy that and bring that there.
Yeah.
And for us, it's in Mystic, Connecticut. It's 3 hours away. So you have to hire people to do that. So it's a completely different version of the business. But there's some huge gains to it too. And I'm a big believer in this. If you're thinking, you know, I'm in my 50s now. So we bought that property as a second home. And then we put it on Airbnb.
Oh, there you go.
So it covers the mortgage sometimes. And then we get to go there. So I stay there usually in August for a couple of weeks. That's our vacation spot. And it's not a vacant home. But if we rented it, I wouldn't be able to go there.
Right.
So to me, that was a different strategy with that.
Leverage it for yourself too.
Maybe someday that'll be my, when I'm an old man.
Which is
I'll
great.
be in Mystic, Connecticut.
So when you started 20 years ago, are there any systems that you weren't using, or any tools, or anything that you weren't using then that you're using now that you've developed through the years?
You know, the screening process has changed dramatically for our tenants. It used to be a handshake. And how quickly they could move in, that was a factor. Now that's a negative, but it used to be a positive. So now we do full background checks on everybody. We're doing credit report checks. So obviously our phones have allowed us to do those things. 20 years ago, those things were hard to do.
Sure.
You had to hire a company to do it. Now you can do it right on your phone. Background checks, criminal checks, all that. So I think that's the biggest thing for us. And then obviously, you know, from a rental standpoint, when we started, tenants used to have to mail us a check. Checks would get lost, they wouldn't come. The tenants could always say, oh, I mailed that, I don't know what happened. Now everything's electronic. So it's either auto drafted out of their checking account or they're sending it on Venmo. So it's instantaneous.
Is that something you require?
I don't require it, but
I don't
we
know
strongly,
if we can, but
correct, but we strongly recommend it. You know, one thing that I have implemented with our rental process is I no longer take cash. Now I say that, have I ever taken cash? Yes, but I really don't want cash for a couple different reasons. One, it's hard to do a receipt. When someone gives you cash, there's the awkwardness of counting the money in front of them, always makes me feel awkward. Then you have to handwrite a receipt, which can be easily duplicated and lost or redone, backdated. Venmo is automatic, it's time stamped, you can show that you did it. Or a check, you can show the deposit and all that other stuff. So I prefer the electronic stuff now. And cash, there have been plenty of times where tenants have given me cash. You know, you got $1,000 in your pocket and then you get home and you don't have it anymore. That's happened to me a few times. You know, I'm like, geez, it probably fell out of my pocket. So we primarily really push for everything to be electronic these days. And most tenants prefer that. Everybody's pretty much to the electronic phase now in life.
If someone was considering making their first investment, would you say fix and flip or multi-unit first?
I think the fix and flip in today's world is easier to do. And I know that may surprise people, but there's a lot of private, it's easy to find private lenders these days. You couldn't find them 20 years ago. Try to find someone that was going to give you $300,000.
Right.
Very difficult. Now they have websites, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, very easy to find. There's different networking groups. So I think it's easier to use the BRRRR method style of borrowing the money from someone, buying a single family house, renovating it and selling it. So I think it's easier to do a flip than it is a rental. Rentals, typically you're buying something on the market, you're usually doing a down payment, which is difficult for some new investors to have a 20% down payment. So I think it's easier to do a flip than it is a rental these days. But I think everybody on the planet should have a rental. You know, and again, not to get back to the beginning of risk, but you know, my rentals have lowered my risk. Like a lot of people think what I do is very risky, and I don't. I've changed my whole definition of risk. Risk was having one job and one source of income that I could be fired at any time. I've lowered my risk by having a ton of rentals. And there have been even times in the last 5 years that I went, ooh, money is a little tough or a little tight. Let's sell a rental property. And I sold them, and then there's that equity, and now we're all good to keep this machine moving forward. So rentals have lowered my risk. So I think every person on the planet should get into real estate. Everybody should buy a rental property, even if you have one or two. 20 years from now, it's going to double in value, it's going to be paid off, and you sell it, and there's $500,000 for your retirement. So everybody should be doing this. But which one's easier? I think a flip is easier than a long-term rental in the beginning.
Okay, awesome information. Love it. And if you are thinking of investing in property, or maybe you have a property that you want to sell, call me, Christine Serafini, Miranda Real Estate Group, 518-514-8830. I have someone here that is looking for that perfect deal.
I'll buy it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.